From the outside, I had everything: a good man, a stable home, a life with no sharp edges. He made coffee every morning. He told me he loved me 10 times a day. He called me his person, like it was the highest honor in the world. And for a long time, I believed it was. His name is Adam. He's the kind of man people dream of marrying. He remembers anniversaries without Facebook reminders, sends flowers just because, texts me when I leave the house to say, I already miss you, and again when I come back to say, the world's right again. He worshiped me. That's not an exaggeration. His friends used to joke that he was obsessed, that I must have saved his life in a past one, that if I ever left, he'd probably follow me across the country barefoot. At first, it felt beautiful to be seen like that, to be adored without condition. After my last relationship, which was cold, distant, and full of second-guessing, Adam was the opposite. He made me feel safe. But somewhere along the way, safe became suffocating. It wasn't one thing. It wasn't like he changed. If anything, he became more attentive over time, more in tune, more present. He'd ask how I slept, even when he was already late for work. He'd send lunch to my office without asking, with notes like, I hope you're eating, love. And everyone around me said, you're so lucky. And I nodded, smiled, said I know. But what I didn't say was, I was starting to feel like I couldn't move without being watched. Not in a controlling way, just completely enveloped. He wanted to be part of everything: what I was reading, what I was thinking, who I was texting. If I was quiet, he'd ask if something was wrong. If I laughed at a meme, he wanted to see it too. If I went for a walk alone, he'd text 5 minutes in, miss you already. And every time I said I was fine, he'd say, are you sure? You don't sound fine. I started to feel like my feelings weren't mine anymore. Like my moods were his responsibility. Like my silence meant he had failed in some way, even when it had nothing to do with him. And I hated that I couldn't say it out loud. Because how do you tell someone who loves you so well? You're making me disappear. I started to pull away, slowly, subtly. I took longer to reply to texts, said I was tired more often, stopped initiating kisses. I wasn't even sure why at first. I just wanted space. Wanted to remember what it felt like to be a person separate from someone else's devotion. He noticed. Of course he did. He started trying harder, cooking more, planning surprise weekends, buying things I'd casually mentioned once months ago. And the guilt was constant, because I knew he was doing it out of love, and I was shrinking from it like it was a threat. At night, I'd lie awake next to him and listen to his breath. He always reached for me in his sleep, always wrapped his arm around me like he couldn't rest unless I was held. I used to love that. Now it made me feel like I couldn't breathe. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Who would understand? What do you say? My boyfriend loves me too much and it's destroying me. It sounds like something out of a bad poem. But it was real. And every time I tried to push down the feeling, the urge to just be alone, to be unknown, unseen, it only got louder. I didn't cheat because he was mean. I didn't cheat because I was lonely. I cheated because I didn't know who I was anymore. And I needed to find out before his love erased the last of me. It happened at work. Not the cheating, not yet. But the first crack in the wall I'd spent years building around my relationship. His name was Ryan. He wasn't particularly charming. He didn't flirt. He wasn't the kind of guy people gravitated toward at office parties. But he was simple, grounded, unimpressed by everything. The opposite of Adam, He didn't ask personal questions, didn't compliment my hair when I changed it, didn't offer to carry my things or tell me I was glowing every time I spoke. He just treated me like a person. No more, no less. And I didn't notice how good that felt until it became the only part of my day where I could breathe. We ended up on a project together. Long hours, late nights, conference rooms that started to feel like hiding places. We talked mostly about work, deadlines, annoying clients. But once, during a break, I mentioned that I hated how much noise the office lights made. That weird, high-pitched hum no one else seemed to hear. He looked at me and said, "You're not crazy. I hear it too." That was it. That was the moment. Not flirtation, not eye contact, just someone hearing me without turning it into a declaration of love. I found myself lingering after meetings, sitting near him during lunch, laughing at things that weren't that funny just because I liked the sound of my own voice around him. Because it didn't feel curated. It didn't feel observed. It felt mine. Adam started noticing something was off. I could see it in the way he looked at me when I got home late. He didn't ask where I'd been, not directly, but his eyes did. And I answered them with a kiss on the cheek and a tired smile. Because lying by omission was easier than explaining the truth I didn't fully understand. Ryan never asked about Adam. I never volunteered. There was an unspoken line between us, and for a while it held. But it stretched further every time we were alone. Every time he stood a little too close. Every time our fingers brushed when passing something back and forth. The first time I really thought about crossing it, we were working late. Everyone else had gone home. We were sitting side by side, reviewing a client brief when I dropped my pen. He reached for it. Our hands touched. He didn't move his. Neither did I. And that silence, it said everything. I pulled back first, stood too fast, said something about needing to get home. He nodded, said nothing. But something had already shifted. That night, Adam was waiting with takeout and a new playlist he'd made for me. He'd called it For Her Heart. He kissed me like he hadn't seen me in days, told me I was everything he'd ever wanted. And I felt myself float away again. Not because I didn't love him, but because I couldn't feel anything through all the love he wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't asked for. I sat with him, ate the food, smiled at the right parts of the songs. And all I could think about was how much I missed being nobody to someone. Just me. No pedestal, no spotlight, no perfect. Just a person in a room being looked at like I didn't owe anyone a thing. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic night. No drinks, no build-up. Just another long work day, another too late evening, and a too quiet office. Ryan and I were wrapping up a presentation. The rest of the floor had gone dark. The only light was from the monitor and the soft glow from the hallway. It felt like we were the last people left in the city. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes for a second. He said, "You okay?" I nodded. "Just tired." He turned to me. "You've been tired a lot lately." And that was the first time anyone said it without sounding like they wanted to fix it. I looked at him, not flirtatiously, not dramatically, just open. He asked, "Is he good to you?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I said, but it came out like a question. Ryan didn't push, just nodded and went back to his screen. We sat like that in silence, typing, clicking, breathing, until I stood up, walked toward the door, and stopped. "I'm not going home yet," I said. I don't even know why. He looked up. I met his eyes, held them. He didn't say anything, but when I stepped back towards him, he didn't move. The kiss was quiet, not desperate, just a closing of space between two people who had been sitting on the edge of it for too long. His hands were cautious, not claiming. I didn't feel possessed. I felt alone, finally, in a way that made sense. We didn't speak after, just stood apart, unsure of what came next. I left before it could turn into something else. When I got home, Adam was waiting with tea and a blanket and 3 different shows queued up in case I was too tired to choose. He kissed my forehead, told me he'd warmed up the bathroom in case I wanted a bath, said he'd already prepped lunch for tomorrow. I stared at him and wondered, what would he do if he knew where I just came from? Would he break? Would he blame himself? Would he still love me? And the most painful thought of all was, yes, he would. He would love me even now. Maybe even harder. Maybe even more gently. And I realized then that nothing I could do would ever change that. Not because he was naive, but because he believed in a version of me I had long since stopped being. The next morning, I woke up early, showered in silence, avoided his eyes at breakfast, said I had another late meeting. He kissed my hand and told me to go be brilliant. And I walked out the door knowing full well I was about to do the opposite. It didn't become an affair overnight. There was no next time that marked the shift, no dramatic moment. It was slower than that. Quieter, more dangerous because it never felt like a decision. It just kept happening. A kiss became a touch became a night became another. And suddenly I had 2 lives. One where I was adored, one where I was invisible, and I craved that more. With Ryan, there were no questions, no expectations, no gifts, no playlists, no gentle reminders to drink more water. We didn't talk about feelings or the future. We didn't talk about much at all. And that's why I kept going back. Because when I was with him, I wasn't being celebrated. I was just existing as a body, a presence, a person who didn't owe anyone joy. I told myself it was just a phase, that I'd figure it out, that this was about clarity, about space, about finding myself again. But that was a lie. It wasn't about clarity. It was about chaos. It was about the thrill of being unknown, of being unreachable, of finally being someone Adam didn't already have memorized. Back home, everything continued as usual. Adam didn't change. If anything, he became more thoughtful. He started cooking more, bought tickets to a play I mentioned once in passing. He called me his light, his safe place. And with every sweet word, I sank deeper into guilt I didn't know what to do with. Because how do you confess to someone who's never once made you feel small? How do you break the heart of a man who spent every day protecting yours? I started resenting him for not noticing, for not asking, for trusting me so completely. I wanted him to question me, to check my phone, to doubt me just once, so I could have a reason to collapse. But he never did. He looked at me like I was unbreakable. And that's what made it so easy to keep breaking him behind his back. I began moving through our home like a ghost. I smiled when I needed to, laughed in the right places, touched him gently when he reached for me. But I wasn't there. Not really. At night, I'd lie beside him and listen to him breathe. He still held me the same way. Still curled around me like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And I started to wonder what kind of person that made me. What kind of woman cheats on a man for being too kind, too loving, too devoted? But every time I asked myself that, I already knew the answer. Someone who never learned how to be loved without disappearing in it. I almost told him that night. We were on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, a bottle of wine between us. The city below was quiet. He had made my favorite pasta, played my favorite song, the kind of night you see in commercials for happiness. And still, all I could feel was how far away I was. He was talking about a trip we should take, somewhere quiet, near the mountains. He said we deserved a reset. He said he could tell I'd been tired lately, that maybe we both needed to breathe. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were so full of softness, trust, belief. And I thought, say it now. Tell him everything. Let the truth fall and see what survives. So I opened my mouth. And just as the words began to gather, he reached for my hand and said, I know you're going through something, and I just want you to know I'll wait for you, however long it takes. That stopped me. Completely. Because he didn't know, and yet he was already promising forgiveness for something he hadn't even imagined. I stared at him, stunned. And I said the only thing I could say without destroying him. Thank you. He squeezed my hand, smiled, kissed my fingers. And I swallowed the confession like it never existed. Because I couldn't do it. Not after that. Not after being handed unconditional grace. I went to bed next to him that night feeling more alone than I had ever felt. Not because I didn't deserve his love, but because I knew in that moment that I would never be able to accept it again. Not fully, not honestly, and nothing he could do would bring me back. Because the more he waited for me, the more I vanished. I started avoiding home more after that. Said yes to more late nights, more work events. I lied with a kind tone, with a smile, with soft kisses on the way out the door. And each time he sent me off with love, not knowing he was sending me into someone else's arms. I think deep down I wanted him to catch me. Not to punish me, but to free me. Because I didn't know how to end it myself. And love like his, it doesn't give up. Even when it should. He found out on a Sunday. I don't know how. I never asked. Maybe a message. Maybe a call log. Maybe something I forgot to delete in my quiet unraveling. But when I walked through the door that evening, everything was still. The kind of stillness that hums in your bones before a storm. He was sitting at the table, hands folded, phone beside him, eyes tired. I opened my mouth, ready to reach for a story, a question, a half-truth. But he spoke first. Is it him from work? I paused, then nodded. He closed his eyes for a second, like he was letting the confirmation land where he already knew it would. How long? He asked. A while, I said. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't ask why. Instead, he said, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't think you'd let it go this far. I sat across from him. He looked at me, not with anger, but with something closer to grief. I would have forgiven you, he said quietly. If you told me. I blinked. You still might, I whispered, not even believing it myself. He shook his head. Number, that's the problem. I didn't understand. Until he added, I would have forgiven anything. That's why I have to leave. That's when I broke. Not because he was yelling, not because he was cruel, but because he was calm. Because he finally understood what I had been afraid to admit, that his love had no edges. And I had used that softness as a shield for everything I didn't want to face. I said, I'm sorry. He nodded. I know. I said, I didn't mean to. And he cut me off gently. You meant to disappear. And you did. He stood, picked up his bag, packed already. Nothing dramatic. Just the essentials. He'd been planning this. Probably for days. Maybe weeks. I hope you find what you're looking for, he said. I stood there frozen. He paused at the door, looked at me one last time. I don't hate you, he said, but I don't recognize you anymore. And then he left, and I let him. I stood in the silence he left behind and realized something I never had the courage to say before. I didn't cheat to leave him. I cheated to leave myself. And I don't know if I'll ever come back.